and I didn't know. I had just graduated high school. I started going to Fresno City, and here I am at a crossroads, a fork in the road, I guess you could say.
Welcome to If the Apostles Had a Podcast. My name is Dr. Saul Salinas, and we're here with our guests. But before we get started, I want to give a little bit of context how this came about. Something that was really exciting in my life, I was able to post something on social media that got a lot of attraction. It wasn't anything fancy. It was a minute and a half video, but a lot of people began to like it, share it, comment about it. It was a graduation. And from there, they did a data analysis, and it turns out that over 40,000 hours were spent watching this video. Then I really started, that excited me, but also scared me at the same time, because that's how many people who watched this 1.5 minute video. 40,000 hours were spent watching it. So then I began to really, how do we use this in the positive? Like, how do we use this type of momentum in the positive? I approached Pastor Tony here at the church to say, hey, with the help of Jackie, can we do this? I know the church has invested a lot in equipment after COVID, and we have online ministry as well. So I approached them and said, hey, how can we do this? How can we also begin to document the stories of starting with maybe our church members, like those lived experiences? I've done a lot of research, and my area of research is the lived experiences of people. And for me, I think our stories, although I appreciate race, class, religion, gender, it's the stories who make us who we are. So I approached Pastor Tony and said, how can we begin to document some of those stories through video, through audio, and really get those out there in the community, and also have our church members begin to get to know one another at a little bit more intimate level. And we also know there's a little bit of a challenge spending so much time one-on-one with individuals. So this is something that maybe they get to know each other, they get to know me a little bit, but more of our guests. So we called it If the Apostles Had a Podcast. Not that we're an apostle, but at the same time, we feel this would be something very unique if the apostles did have a podcast. So our first series is the Acts of the Bible. And not to say we're going to cover the Acts of the Bible, but as the Acts of the Bible, they are still occurring today. We still feel that the miracles of yesterday and today and tomorrow are still occurring, and we want to do our best to document that. So with that, I have Pastor Tony Mendez from Crosspoint Church. I've known him for a long time, and he's going to be our guest for today. So welcome, Pastor Mendez.
Hey, thank you guys. I really do appreciate being here with you, Dr. Salinas. And it's exciting. When you approached me with the idea, I was like, whoa, look, this is really going to happen. I was excited. There was this whole thing inside me like, wow, what we as a church have done, because all the cameras and lights, like, this is what the church has come together, has pulled together to put out there for individuals who have yet to see the church, who maybe they're sick one weekend, so church members are able to log on to youtube.com and go to CrosspointFresno, and then the sermon will be there, the worship will be there. People who are checking us out for the first time, they want to see what we're about. They want to see who we are. So this is a really good first introduction. This is what I would like to call the starting point, a play on words of Crosspoint, but it is the starting point of Crosspoint. This is our window now, just like how everybody in back in the day used to be websites. Now we're using video. Now we're using audio. Well, what do you guys sound like? What do you guys look like? And it really is interesting to see. And so when you came to me with this idea, I was like, wow, this is really, really neat. We got to do it.
Yeah. All right, Pastor. Let's just jump right in. We're going to talk some historical piece. You are a PK. Your dad is a pastor. Your grandfather is a pastor. So talk a little bit about that in regards to growing up as a young individual and with that environment.
Yeah, I can honestly say, and it's so interesting that you bring up this question, because I can honestly say I was 5 years old. And I remember on a Saturday morning reading my mom's Bible, and it was a King James version, and I had told her, Mom, I memorized Genesis 1:3, and it was God created light. He saw that it was good. And then there was day and there was evening. And so I tell my mom this, and uh, it was maybe a few months later that we're all there in our living room, and we live in this smaller house, uh, and we're there in our living room, and I tell them, hey, I'd like to accept Jesus into my heart. So by the time I'm about 7, and they said, okay. So they go through the process. They say what the Lord's Prayer is with me, and I accept Jesus into my heart. And then from there, it led from accepting Jesus into my heart to baptism. And there's just so many different changes that are going on in that time. Dad is a welder. He's working hard. We're in the middle of selling our first house and buying our second house. And that's when a lot of change begins to happen. Uh, Careers are changing, places of worship are changing, and even the whole idea of what is happening is changing. Life did not stay the same. So we always stayed we were raised in a very Christian home. Dad was an associate pastor at Calwood Baptist Church, as well as being a welder. He was laid off as a welder, and he went to the Fresno County Sheriff's Department to serve as a chaplain. And while he was serving there as a chaplain, the Lord had already called him to our church, to Crosspoint. And it was just timing, God's timing. When he got called to the church, that's when a lot of stuff really changed for us. Being in a new house, schools, uh, just everything, but always living a very humble life, a life that was always grateful to the Lord for what we had.
I'm going to take you a little bit back a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think there's misconception that when you're a PK, when you're a pastor's kid, things are lovey-dovey the whole time, right? Things are very, it's like Disneyland, right? Magical experience, no issues. We do know, if I remember correctly, when you were a freshman, right? Without going into too much detail, you had something very, very traumatic occurred. So please talk a little bit about that and talk about the connection with your faith, with God at that time, and any challenges that quite possibly surface at that time.
Definitely. At this point in my life, so we fast forwarded now. We've been at the church for several years. You've entered our lives at this point. Very proactive in music education, and that's what I really enjoyed. And I had a friend that I went from junior high school to high school with, and just one day they would go from Clovis, California, to their dad's house that was out of state, and they would go back and forth. Well, one day something terrible happened, and there just was an accident. At this point in my life, I was serving the Lord. I was very happy with playing the saxophone, doing sound, doing lighting, learning about it. I was very happy with that. And I remember getting the text, because texting was real big for us. It's still big today, but it was real big for us. And we were here at church, and I remember we were practicing that song, Eagle's Wings. And in that song, it says, I will rise. I will rise on eagle's wings. And I get this text about my friend passing away in this accident. At this point in my life, I had already made up my mind that I wanted to be a pastor. 14, 15 years old, this is what I want to do. But when this accident happened, it almost changed the trajectory of my current life at that point. had a lot of questions for God. I had a lot of questions about why this had to happen. What was it for? I had a lot of questions about why even I was here, why I had to experience it. And one thing that I can say that I never stopped doing, though, during this time is I never stopped coming to church. Even though my faith in God was shaken, even to the point of truly believing if God was real. And you have to remember, I had accepted Christ. I had been baptized already. I had been prayed over 2 years prior by another brother in the church. We were at a college camp, and I heard the Lord call me into the ministry. I accepted the call. The speaker was saying, if any of you feel the call into ministry, come up right now and we'll pray for you. And I felt the call at a college camp that my dad was speaking at. And I went up and I was prayed for, and it was this very real moment. It was like just looking at you. It was all audibly, though. I heard the Lord said, I'm setting you apart. And then everything else came back. I heard all of the praying, all of the music. So I had all of this in my heart already. And then this happens, this traumatic event. And I had to ask myself, okay, God, why? Why did she have to pass? Why I have this call in my life? Is it even real? But one thing that I always came back to and that I never stopped was serving. During my hurt, during my questioning, during the time where I was working it out, I was still singing. I was still playing the saxophone. I was still serving in different ministries, Vacation Bible School. We had Thanksgiving banquets here. I would serve in the Thanksgiving banquets. And I don't think many, other than like family, and I don't think many people understood like what I was feeling and what I was going through. So with all of that, high school changed. You know, I will say I did become a mean person. I was always very happy and loving. And in some ways, you could just say I just didn't care anymore. And so it took me about 4 years to really work it out. And I remember my dad being a part of this transitional part of my life right after high school, and him saying, hey, what are you going to do with your life? And I have three ways of talking to my dad. I have talking to him as my dad, as my pastor, because I do work for him. He is my boss. He doesn't like me to say that, but he is. And then I have pastor dad. And pastor dad is a combination of dad and pastor. So sometimes I never know how he's speaking to me, or other times I really know how he's communicating something to me. And at this point, he was talking to me as my pastor with all love and respect. What are you going to do with your life? And I didn't know. I had just graduated high school. I started going to Fresno City, and here I am at a crossroads, a fork in the road, I guess you could say. I can continue on my track and it not be the track that the Lord wanted for me, or I could really give in to what God wanted for me, where I was running away. Because in my heart, I always wanted to help people still. And you got to remember, I had been prayed over. I had accepted the call as a young teenager to go into the gospel ministry. But I wanted to be a counselor. I wanted to be someone that was going to help people, an EMT, firefighter. It didn't really matter what I was going to do. I just wanted to help people. And at that moment, when my dad was asking me, what are you going to do with your life? I just said, I have to give it all to him. He said, yes, you do. So what I want you to do is I want you to quit your jobs. You continue to finish your semester, but after that, you're going to come intern at the church. You're not going to make any money. You're just going to come intern at the church. And through all of this, to even hit the question, how did I get through the trauma of it? I got through the trauma of it by just surrendering to the Lord. When I surrendered all of it to God, that's when it became a healing aspect in my life. Because now, at some point, I don't know when, but at some point, the trauma's not there anymore. I don't have hate in my heart towards it. It's not something that I look forward to talking about, but it's definitely not something that I just say, oh no, let's not talk about that. Because I never know how my story is going to impact somebody else's. Right. And that's truly what my life is about now, is how can my life be used to help you? So that's how I got through it. I surrendered to God.
There's a saying that trauma doesn't define us; it refines us.
Yes.
Right. So I think, and it's interesting because it sounds like you're going through the motions for a few years, right? You're serving, you're playing, you were present. You probably had that smile. And maybe some people that didn't know who you were maybe thought, hey, he's always smiling, he's always happy, but it was probably a front for the most part at some times, right?
Oh yeah, a lot of the time it was.
So your dad asked you this very difficult question, what are you gonna do with your life? You surrender, you become obedient, you say, this is what I want to do. Talk a little about how that took place, because I believe sometimes folks think, oh, just anybody could go on the pulpit, right, and preach, and anybody could do this, and there's certifications, there's credentials behind it that not just anybody. I guess you can put anybody up there, but it doesn't mean that they're going to be effective, right, or that's the will of God. So talk a little bit about the business side of becoming a pastor, because now you're a pastor.
Yes.
Yeah, you're not a intern. You're not just somebody who's just kind of just there. You're actually, tell us how that happened.
Yeah, going back, I started with the question and the leadership of my dad telling me, you're going to come and intern at the church. I didn't know what that was all going to involve at first. I thought it was just, I'm going to come and have a good time. I'm going to sit with my dad, we're going to talk about church. I had at this point already, even going through the motions, I had led different Bible studies. I had led different vacation Bible schools. I was a part of different ministries in town at other churches already serving. So I didn't know what this internship was going to look like. I had never even really heard of an internship at a church. So what it consisted of at first was I had to read one proverb a day, every day.
And there's 31 Proverbs.
And there's 31 Proverbs.
One for each day.
And one for each day. It is pretty easy to start reading the Bible that way. But if I'm just going to be completely honest with you, I didn't like it. I hated reading. I would say I'm not a very strong reader. What takes individuals maybe 30 minutes to read, it takes me about an hour to read, just because I go back and forth. I read and then I reread and then I reread just to finish a simple text or a simple page. So when doing that, he told me, you're going to read a proverb, you're going to journal, and then after you're done, we're going to go have lunch, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to have a task for you. Okay, Dad, that seems, good. I dreaded it for the first few weeks, but there's this point within 2-3 weeks that I enjoyed it. Now, the tasks that he gave me as an intern, I didn't enjoy, because it started at cleaning the toilets. I would have to clean all the toilets here at the church. We didn't have a janitor or custodian. It was us. We cleaned them. We clean them still. But cleaning these toilets really helped make me who I am. because there is a process in which you have to clean the restrooms. You can't use the same towel that you clean the sinks with to clean the toilet. You can't use the same even detergents and soaps and disinfectants on the sink that you have to use on the toilets. So when cleaning the toilets, you have to get down on it. You have to clean the lever. You have to clean the top. You have to clean the seat. And then there is something that when I go into a restroom now and I look at, it's the bolts on the floor. Not all people clean that bolt on the floor. And that's really where it makes a difference. Those little things make a difference when you walk into a restroom and see the bolts and they're dirty. The whole toilet can be clean. The whole restroom can be clean, except for that bolt. And what ended up happening was I began to fall in love with details. I began to fall in love with how when cleaning the restrooms and the toilets, the details in which you clean them with. You have to know how long to let the Clorox sit in order for it to disinfect and to clean. And then after you're all done, did you wipe the Clorox off? Did you do a final wipe of all of the sink and all of the instruments and paper towel holders, dispensers, and everything? Did you do that? So that was the first real task that I had here at the church. And then from there, as interning continued, it changed. So I began to look for something that I can excel in, something that I can work at, something that I can do. So reading the Bible was always a number one. Praying was always a number one. And then everything else was a number two. So reading, praying, cleaning. And then what can I do to make myself be a part of the church? And then schooling happened. So I'm continuing to go to school. And within my internship, I received a luncheon invitation for Cal Baptist University for their Bachelor's of Applied Theology. So I accepted this invitation and I went, I heard what they said, and I just felt the Lord tell me, you need to go. You need to go. And so I went. I said, wow. And I came back and I stayed in school and I continued working, and I knew what God had prepared me to do. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I knew I was supposed to be here at the church. So I told my dad when I came back from school, Dad, I don't know if I can ever get paid. I don't know if there will ever be a time where I'm really a pastor here at this church. But I know that I'm supposed to be here. So whatever you need me to do, I'm going to do it. So at that time, it started off cleaning the restrooms again. But then it worked up. I became the church gardener for a little while. And then from the church gardener, I became the website designer and updater. I became responsible for the website. From that instance, the website, that led to a plethora of different avenues within the church that I began to learn different roles, different classes being taught, ministries restarting, and possibly even taking a turn to join with a different ministry. All of this I'm going through and I'm receiving my education, and then finally I'm graduating. I get my education, my certificates, and now I feel like, yes, I'm a pastor. I have the education, but there still was a little part of me that needed to learn to love people. I loved God. But the question that I had to answer for myself, because anybody can preach, anybody can pray, anybody can read the Bible and study it. But the number one thing that God asks us to do is love your neighbor. Love him first, and then love your neighbor. and I wasn't sure I can love people yet. I had a lot of trauma, a lot of baggage in my life that led to that. Even though I was loving God, I didn't know if I can love people. I didn't know if I wanted to. Because when you experience stuff, when you experience hurt, when you experience loss, there's a little bit of you that leaves too. And you ask the question, well, I don't know if I can ever do that again. I don't ever think I want to do that again. But again, I had to surrender it all. Okay, God, show me how to love people. That's all a pastor does, is love people, love God, love the church, love serving, love doing anything that has to do with him. Just love it.
Yeah, definitely love unites us.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Brings us together. But pain transforms us.
Yes.
And I wrote a little something at some point where pain is just as powerful as love, and at times more powerful, because love sometimes is the constant, but the pain goes up and down, right?
Yeah.
So I was privileged enough, and I don't recall what year it was. I got to listen to you preach for the first time.
Yeah.
Because I remember I had my camera that day and I took pictures, and I have it even on my Facebook in a folder, Tony's first message or something like that. In that message, it was really interesting because you did really well.
Thank you.
You knew your stuff, you're prepared, but I couldn't help but think when I left, he sure is attempting to sound like his dad.
Yeah.
And I know that was your role model, your what we call in the internship, your field instructor.
Yeah.
This is your dad. Like, who else would you? But I remember leaving saying, if Tony could find where God wants him, he's just, it's endless, the opportunity. And then fast forward, I think you were up there a few times, and I was like, oh yeah. And one time you just brought it, but God worked through Tony. God didn't go to Pastor Johnny and took a pause and then worked through Pastor. It was a straight. And I remember when that shift happened, I remember my wife was sitting there thinking, why are you so happy? And I was like, because Tony is preaching, and he's preaching within himself and what the Lord is allowing him. So what that showed me is he's being very obedient, and the Lord had poured into Tony, and now Tony's preaching because Tony's worthy, right? But I know at the first time, so I was fortunate to be part of that particular part of your history. So now you're a pastor. The toilet, that is an amazing story in regards to how you take that and how you pay attention to detail.
Yeah.
The tornillos, the in the bottom, and making sure that's all clean, the handle's all clean. So now you're this pastor. You've done a phenomenal amount of variety of diverse work, whether it's web development, you're up there on the stage singing, playing instruments, leading. So what now? What now? How do you see... and just to give the listeners a little context, Crosspoint has had in the last 20 years a kind of up and down in regards to membership, right?
Yeah.
It gets really packed. The Crosspoint has planted several churches,
Yes.
responsible for a lot of different ministries. But anytime people tend to leave to go plant a church, it takes a toll on the church, right?
Yes.
And right now we're on the peak end, right? And I remember the last couple Sundays we've had to take out some chairs. I'm like, when you hear the clank, 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 clank,
Yeah.
it sounds disruptive, but that's kind of exciting too. And I get to be in the front on the left, and when I look, I have a difficult time seeing empty chairs. And usually we would have rows of chairs depending on which peak and valley we're in. So as a church leader, as someone who's very involved, how does that make you feel in regards to seeing the transformation of what God's doing now? And you have folks coming in that are like prepared to lead.
Yes.
And they're prepared to be discipled, but you also have folks that are very prepared to lead. So how does that make you feel, and where do you see yourself or where do you see this is your time to now cast vision? Like where can this possibly go? Where has God led in your heart to possibly like what's in just kind of like let's take a little bit of time just going into your brain and pulling out some information. Like what do you think? One is it's exciting, but at the same time, what's next?
You know, the cliche answer is only God knows. But in all honesty, it is so riveting to see the church in its present time. Uh, Individuals coming and saying, I could do this, I could do that. Individuals saying, well, who is God? Why am I here? Individuals even on the fence of, like, I've been in church a lot of my life, and I just, I don't know. I'm teetering back and forth. Is God real? Is this church thing real, or is it not? Like, do I just need to go live my life? And it's really exciting. And how I would say is anybody who's on that fence, anybody who's just coming, don't stop. Continue to come. I was just telling a young man the other day, give us a shot. We give everything else a try, right? I even tell my kids, I tell them, you got to give it a shot. You got to give it a try. And if you don't like it in 2 weeks, then you don't like it. That's fine. We can change it. The book, the shoes, the clothes, we can change it. But I would ask everybody to just give it a shot, because the Lord is moving, and it brings me so much joy to see God moving in his people. And I know God's moving just by the chairs coming out, because it's not me anymore. It's not just us anymore inviting people. It's the people inviting people. And then the people of those people inviting people in. And it's not because I think we are great at what we do. We have my dad, our pastor, is a phenomenal expositor. We have a top-notch worship team. They are wonderful musicians and singers. We have a wonderful, wonderful children's church, and it doesn't get any better than that. And if you want to be a part of the team, you got to just go ask, be a part of it. But give us a shot, because God is working through every part of us, a part of the church, not just me, not just my dad, not just the different ministries, but God's working through the people. So when I look at the church and what I would like to see, I can't really say for the church. I'd love to see it grow. I'd love to see it get better and stronger and do more and do this. But I'm just going to keep it to the worship team and the creative team, because that's what I work with. And I am so thankful that to the church that we do have cameras, that we do have lighting, that we do have sound, because the church is what made this possible. Crosspoint is what made Crosspoint Live a thing. Having a YouTube channel, having this and that. And I was given the opportunity and the blessing to be able to steward all of this, and be able to take it from one level of no live stream to now we have a live stream to now what it is today. We have 3 cameras. We have soundboards. We just did a huge in-house sound upgrade, and that was only possible by the church. So, and meaning the people continuing to tithe, to give their offerings. And so when I see that, and I see the people who are serving as musicians and singers, my biggest hope, my biggest vision, how I could see that for maybe the next 10 years, is I want every person, each and every person who's leading in this ministry, singing, playing an instrument, working the soundboard, working the computer, working the cameras, being a camera technician. I want each and every individual to look and be this inviting person. I want them, I want their spirit, their joy, their love, their peace. I'm quoting the fruit of the spirit now, their gentleness, their goodness, their self-control, their faithfulness. I want that to be so attractive. And if we grow, we grow. If we don't, we don't. But my biggest goal for the worship team and creative teams is that we exhibit Christ likeness. That's all I care about. Because if we start saying, "Oh, I want to do this, I want to do that," then that's great. That's awesome. We could do a lot of different things like that. We could do a lot of different things with new inventions and innovations. But if we don't have Christ at the center of it, then it's just going to be for us and no more. And that's not the way that I see God. God says, I've come to save the world. I sent my son to save the world. That means he wants a huge family. He wants people to be around. And if I can exhibit Christ-likeness, if the singers can exhibit Christ-likeness, the musicians, all the different technicians in the sound booth and camera booth, if they can exhibit Christ-likeness, that's going to be attractive because Christ-likeness is attractive. What's not attractive about love? What's not attractive about peace? What's not attractive about joy, goodness, patience? What's not attractive about that? So my biggest goal as I've been in this role as worship pastor for a year now is that we continue to exhibit Christ-likeness, to worship the Lord, and to serve the Lord. Because we can worship the Lord, that's almost like an offering we're giving to the Lord because he's allowed us to do that. He's given us these gifts. But to serve the Lord in those gifts is also a different aspect because now we're not just showing God that we're doing this, but we're showing people how to worship. We're serving God by showing people. So if there's other worshipers, if there's other musicians out there, just come and see me. Let's talk. I want to get to know you because my goal for our team is to just be more like God every week. Every week. Yeah. Just getting a little bit better than the week we were before. And I truly believe that is what's going to change a lot in people's lives. If we just continue to exhibit Christ-likeness, and even going back to what I was saying in my personal testimony of just surrendering to God. Just give him a try.
Yeah, that's powerful. Anytime we do these interviews, I in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, all this happened because of a miracle, an act. And just to summarize Pastor Tony's act is pastor's kid, trauma happened to him at a the Bible never says we're going to get away with not experiencing trauma or abuse or neglect. But when he experienced it, for him, and it was around 4 years of still going through the motions, still attempting to be obedient, but that was a miracle that he didn't sway away too far where he couldn't come back. Mm-hmm. And even if you do sway away too far, you could always come back. It just makes it that much tougher when we sway away. Mm-hmm. So in summary here, Pastor Tony had a difficult time for 4 years, and when he surrendered, things started falling into place. So Pastor Tony, I want to thank you for coming. If the apostles had a podcast, we're excited about this ministry, about this work. Thank you for what you do. You've been a blessing. You're going to continue to be a blessing to a lot of different people. You've done phenomenal work. I personally am proud. I've seen you as a young person. I think you were in middle school when I met you, and now you're a grown man. You're a dad.
I'm a dad.
You're a dad. You're a husband. and you're also a leader. So I appreciate the work that you've done, and we're excited to continue doing the work that we're doing here. So continue following, continue blessing, praying about the work that we're doing,
Yes.
and getting to know one another at a deeper level. Sometimes as humans, we get to know each other as a high and by. We got the high and by pathway, high and by. We have to begin to get to know each other at an intimate level. Every one of us has a story, and our
Yes.
stories matter. But they only matter if our stories move into action. And what we're trying to do here is allow our stories to move into action to bless others. Pastor Tony's a prime example. He was vulnerable. He was very, very open about how his life has started as a pastor's kid to now being a leader here in the church. So thank you. Have a good night. And I just want to say thank you,
Yeah.
Pastor. Any last word?
You said it right, Dr. Salinas. Everybody has a story. And just give it a shot. Share your story. Because there's going to be somebody that needs to hear it. There is. And I know if it weren't for one person sharing with me their vulnerability, then I probably wouldn't have shared mine. But because they shared theirs, it changed how I looked at mine. And I'm really excited. Thank you for this opportunity. And I'm really looking forward to what this could be.
Yeah, on behalf of Crosspoint Church, we welcome you to subscribe to the channel, continue following, continue liking, continue supporting and praying, and we'll see you next time.